I think when we talk about race in America, we often do it too much from the standpoint of today and not enough with an acknowledgement of the history. And it's very easy to feel like history is not a statement of fact the way it's sometimes shared here. And so I just wanted to share one of the things that's been personally really moving for me as being someone inside of corporate America trying to tackle these challenges was a choice that our company made to bring a training in called the Racial Equity Institute. And I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go through that, but there's an analogy they use in the training that we've now used with our corporate leaders that talks about groundwater, right? And so if you walked by a lake and you saw one fish floating in the lake, you'd go, oh, that poor fish. But if you walked by that same lake and you saw it was full of fish floating at the top, what would you ask about? The fish or the lake? And if you were asking about the lake, you would then start to ask about the groundwater. And America's history with race is the groundwater of the previous panel's conversation about why we face so many systemic challenges when it comes to these tough questions around economic opportunity. And so that's not a solution, it's just a statement of fact. But I think if we can start from there, it makes some of the conversations not easier to have, they're really hard to have, but it gives them context that we can share in versus all coming at it from a different standpoint. So the urban-rural question, so earlier this year, Walmart partnered with the McKinsey Global Institute. We have 4,700 stores across the United States, and we employ 1.2 million people. So when you think about the tapestry and the complexity of working Americans, and you think about the complexity of communities in America, Walmart is we're present in the vast majority of those communities. And we were seeing things that are a lot more complex than urban and rural. And we wanted to raise up that economic complexity because it's our nation's challenge today is to figure out how to make space to support and allow each of those different types of communities to thrive. And so we partnered to do this report that looked at the county level of analysis as sort of the micro level of analysis. So we looked across America's 3,000 counties and came up with 8 archetypes of economic regions. And we were looking in particular at variables that contribute to economic resiliency in that community, or said another way, as technology continues to change and automation continues to rise, which regions will be best able to navigate that transformation and that change. And what we found won't surprise anybody, right? It's more complicated than urban and rural. So a couple of examples of the archetypes, and you guys can find this online. Just Google America at Work, and you'll find it. Walmart probably put in there. Is an example of where I live in Bentonville, Arkansas, is a small independent economy. That means we're actually a very vibrant, dynamic economy, but not attached to a large metropolitan area. Another example was the urban core, as distinct from the urban periphery, right, or what we would commonly call the suburbs. But then you also had areas like North Dakota, which were resource-rich regions, strong, booming economies, but for a specific reason and a specific access to natural resource, right? One of my favorites, I feel I can say this while sitting on the stage at Aspen, was the Great Escapes. They were economically and statistically different than everywhere else. These were places like Nantucket or Aspen or Jackson Hole. But looking across the United States and actually seeing that complexity of our 3,000 counties, what you found is that you're going to see as much of Americana and distressed Americana in California as you are in Arkansas. Right? As it happens, you have a higher concentration of the archetype that we term distressed Americana in the American South. And that shouldn't surprise anyone in this room, but it's just a different lens through which to see the complexity of the economic issues in the U.S.
Could you briefly define what distressed Americana,
Sure,
the characteristics
sure.
of that?
So I'm not going to dare attempt to recite the 60 different variables that we used. Again, it's all online. It is Friday afternoon and I'm tired, but it was really cool, right? It's a holistic analysis at things like level of education, wages, rise and fall of GDP in that market, inflow and outflow of population. And so we categorized distressed Americana as places where you're seeing a net decline and or outflow of all of those things. So things are going mostly just down. and not up. And that's not a judgment. It's attempting to be a little bit more of a statement of fact. And then we say, okay, then what become the unique needs of a community where capital is primarily flowing out? Well, it's for capital to flow in, right? And so that's not shocking information, but we don't treat communities necessarily differently based on their economic characteristics. And so what we were trying to say is the way to mitigate changes in technology and changes in the workforce today in a place like Benton, Arkansas, has got to look different than it will in a place like San Francisco, California. And again, that may sound obvious, but as you read the rhetoric on future of work, that complexity often gets lost, and you hear blanket statements about what's happening in America. But America is a collection of regional economies, and we have to look at the unique characteristics of each of those economies.